So without further ado, I'm delighted to welcome Alexandra and Mark, our professional learning and development trainers based in Madrid. And they will be talking to us today about how to make the most of digital tools in preschool classroom. Over to you, Alex and Mark.
Thank you very much, Justina. I'm just going to try and share my screen, and if you can let me know that you can see the presentation okay, that would be fantastic.
Absolutely fine, I think. Yep, we can see the presentation. Oh, no, it's cut off a bit around the edges.
Nothing like a bit of a technical problem to start the session off. Let me just try that again then. Sorry about this.
It's lovely to see all the people from so many different places. That's absolutely perfect now, Alex.
Yep. Excellent. Okay, so we've got about 35 minutes with you this morning, this evening, wherever you are. It's an absolute pleasure to see so many of you here with us. Please do keep your comments coming in the chat box, and we're going to try and leave a bit of time at the end for some questions. Okay, so today we're going to try and look at the following points. What do we mean by embracing digital tools, providing meaningful learning opportunities via digital resources, and also integrating interactive games and activities? So we'd like to get started by asking you to answer this question in the chat box, if you can. So what does digital mean to you? So the first things that come into your mind, the first words, the first ideas, what does digital mean to you? If you could share any ideas with us in the chat box, that would be fantastic.
Nice. Yeah, some lovely ideas coming through straight away. We've got tech, technology, IT, online, internet, challenges. I like that one. Gadgets, PCs. Yeah, so a lot of the physical apparatus, you know, like the computers and PCs, iPads, and cell phones and mobile phones. Nice. So a lot of this is all about being connected, isn't it? I've seen it's about using tools, using the technology in the classroom. But that comes with a lot of challenges because there are many things we need to look at in the classroom, right, Alex?
Absolutely. So these are some of the things that we've picked up on over the last year and a half, especially, you know, given the pandemic and the online teaching situation. These are some of the aspects that teachers have highlighted as being particularly challenging. So again, if you want to comment on them in the chat box, please do. Some things which have, you know, things like safeguarding online, how do you collaborate as much in a virtual, in an online classroom, how do you teach grammar, how do you teach vocabulary, lots of different aspects, which is, you know, I think we've highlighted as particularly challenging in a pre-primary classroom. So moving on, before we look at a couple of activities, how do very young children learn? Mark, any thoughts?
If it was from experience, it would be running around or making a lot of noise. I think that tends to be...
I thought you were going to say making a lot of mess, actually. We've come up with a few ideas here, which I'm sure you're all familiar with as well. But if you do want to add any extra things to this list, then please do. I think we all know, you know, children learn through play, through fun, through enjoying themselves. And that's the thing that we see integrated into lots of course materials as well. The thing is, you know, considering the difference between the physical, the face-to-face classroom and the digital online environment, we're talking about not entirely different things, but there are certainly different factors to take into account. And also, you know, going beyond language, of course, we want to be incorporating literacy skills, guided play, and then also important life competencies, even at a very early stage. So things like emotional development and learning to learn skills. And this is underpinned by, of course, the Cambridge Learning to Learn, the life competencies framework, which we'll be sharing with you later as well. Okay. So how can we continue to do this and also integrate digital resources into the classroom? So we're going to be looking at three examples of how we can do this, whether we're dealing with a face-to-face classroom or a virtual one. Okay, so the first one, how can we use digital visual aids to support our learners? The first example we're going to be looking at is a routine board. Mark, anything to say about this?
Yeah, sure. So when we talk about routine boards, the beauty of them is they fit a lot of the needs of the very young learners. A very young learner needs a routine. They need to be having that familiar habit, right? It helps create a safe space. So if we can use that as a digital space, as a good way to begin a lesson, end a lesson, as like bookmarks, we're sort of introducing like healthy habits with technology, that they know that this is what it means, and also it helps them to interact with the technology at the same time. So any sort of like using the visual, that first impactful visual moment is always a nice way to integrate it into the young learner classroom, or the very young learner classroom.
Absolutely, and we can support that with a couple of language prompts. We've just come up with a few here: transactional language and interactional language, just to give that extra support to learners. So, you can train learners to, say things like morning, see you later, really, how are you today? To give them those little chunks of language that they can associate with different aspects of their routine in the classroom. And I think this routine board, it might be something that you've got pinned onto the board in the classroom face to face, but it's also something which works just as effectively presented in a virtual environment.
Yeah, so it's a nice, I think a nice word is an anchor, isn't it? Because if you have this routine board in your class and the children are familiar with it, and then we have to go teach online with them, maybe it's something they're going to recognize. They can anchor themselves to it and they can see it, and it sort of, it sets the scene, doesn't it? They know what to do, they know the routines, they know what's coming.
Exactly. And I think something I'm sure many of you are familiar with, which you'll have seen in lots of different course materials, something which is really important is that the instructions that we give when we're setting up a task, especially with very young learners, is to make sure that the instructions are short and clear. So we've just given a few examples here, look, say, draw, trace, things which don't distract from the task itself, and things that the students are going to understand and make sure that they're going to be able to carry out the task as effectively as possible.
Yeah, a nice way also is when you're using these short instructions, it's always a really good idea to use some sort of visual support, an icon, an image, an action, especially online, so the children can see and they know you're sort of helping scaffold and support them with their activities, because you're not there to help them, So having that visual reference, maybe they don't follow the word, is always a useful way as well.
Exactly. We've also got a little tip for you here as well, which this is like a traffic light system. So if you are in a face-to-face classroom, sometimes it's hard to tell, especially if we're dealing with large classes, it's hard to tell how comfortable or how maybe not comfortable students are feeling with a particular activity. So this traffic light system, asks them to have a set of coloured dots on their desk, where they can signal to you how comfortable or how not comfortable they're feeling with a particular activity. You could do this online by using the features in a platform like Zoom or something like that. I've just seen a comment in the chat box. Yeah, exactly. The emojis, face cards. Yes, yes. Encouraging learners to share with you how they feel about the activity that they've just done and what you've asked them to do.
A nice way to also bring this into the class, like create that home and school connection, is maybe you can draw the cards in class and they have like a little red face, a green face, a yellow face. And maybe when you're online, they can then show those cards if they're not comfortable, you know, maybe if they're not so good with the computer, they can hold things up to the camera and say, I'm only yellow, I'm not too sure. And then we can try and help them in some way by re-explaining or whatever it might be.
And it is a way of getting feedback from learners, which is really important. Exactly. Right, let's move on. We're going to have a quick look at how we can use images as a digital learning tool as well. Now, I'm sure we're all used to using images in the classroom. This is something which in a virtual environment could be, you know, presented and shared with learners, with parents as well. What could we do with an image like this? Now, this is taken from an example of course material which builds up to a more complex task. But what we need to be thinking about is how we can scaffold it. So by the time students get to the task, they're prepared for it. One of the first things that we thought we could ask learners to do, and we're going to ask you to do it really quickly in, what do you reckon, Mark? I was going to say a minute, maybe.
I like that, a teacher's minute.
A teacher's minute, 30 seconds. Right, so we want you to think of some nouns and some verbs that you associate with this picture or that you can see happening in this picture and write them in the chat box.
Think with your children's minds, you know, what words would your children's maybe pick up on?
And now you've got about 20 seconds. Yeah, exactly. Great. So think nouns, think things, think verbs, think actions. Great. And also thinking of your learners. So you're getting them to think of what language is happening, what do I know, what can I remember, what have I seen before? And then we've got some great comments coming into the
yeah, wonderful. I'm just looking at.
Oh, cookies, books, sister, draw a fish, pencil. I'm going to pick up on that comment because we're going to move on from asking you to pull out some words there, nouns and actions. Moving up a step, now we would like you to put a couple of sentences related to this picture into the chat box. And we're going to give you another teacher's minute, 25 seconds. So if you can write us a couple of sentences about this picture, that would be amazing.
Yeah, good. So we're thinking about our kids, how would they interact with this? What would they say? Yeah, the boy is happy. The dad is wearing glasses. That's lovely. The little boy is shouting. Nice, yeah. So nice, simple.
Cookies
little
around the books. Yeah.
I like that.
There is a doll on the floor.
Wonderful. Yeah, lots of great suggestions and comments in the chat box there.
Fantastic. Okay, I think it's really important just to remind ourselves, though, you know, to start with the visual and then encouraging students to remember, especially at this age, the words and the actions that they can remember, and then building up to sentence level.
I think when doing these types of activities, it's also really important. Obviously, we're talking about slightly higher, very young learners here, like slightly older, sorry, very young learners. But the key here is also to remember that this is like some of the first time they're interacting with technology. So the key, I think, when doing any type of writing task or any type of saying words is, if they're going to write them in a chat box, amazing, give it time. Because it will take a long time for them to write. Or also, if they're going to say it on screen or on the camera, you know, allow everybody the opportunity. Take your time with it, because technology and everything online is always slower than the classroom, and we have to be aware of that. Sorry for butting in there, Alex. I thought I'd just add a 2 cents.
No, not at all. Okay, we're going to have a little look at using videos and stories. We're going to keep going through the slides here, but any input that, or any comments that you'd like to share with us about your experience with using stories in the classroom, face-to-face or online, please do share them with us, okay? We've got an example from one of our pre-primary courses, and this story is called Duck's Friend, and we'll be having a look at a very short clip in just a moment. One of the ideas when we're looking at stories, we think, is that it might be a good idea to break it down and show just a couple of images from the story and encourage students to say, what can they see? Encourage them to, you know, look at the images, focus on them, enjoy them, and predict what they think they're going to see happening in the story, right, Mark?
Yeah, just like we saw in the previous activity, when you're online, offering a lot of opportunities for them to predict, to share, to say things, helps glue activities together. It helps involve everybody in the task. Also, for those of them who maybe aren't as comfortable in English or whatever their situation might be, it can also help give them something to hold on to when you're going on to an activity afterwards.
Yeah, and it breaks it down. I think this particular story, I think, has 8 or 10, you know, images together. So if we can just show the learners 1 or 2 before we show them the actual story. We don't have time today, I'm very sorry, to show you the whole story, but we are going to show you just a little clip if the audio works. So Mark, will you let me know if you can hear us okay?
Can't hear anything.
Duck.
Oh yeah, no, I can.
Yes?
Sorry, yep.
Let me go back. Sorry.
Duck is sad. Duck wants a friend.
Oh, poor Duck, isn't that so sad?
We left everyone really sad now.
Yeah,
That's why we're not showing you the rest of the story.
If you want to see it, yeah.
No, it ends well, yes. So the idea would be to show some images before the story, and as we said, you know, encourage students to say what words do they know, and after the story to show them the whole set of visuals, and then check understanding, to check learners' understanding of, you know, what have they understood, not just in terms of language, but also in terms of the value of the story. So we've come up with a couple of example questions here. Feel free to add any other suggestions in the chat box if you'd like to.
So here you can see some questions. We in our very brief little clip, what you could see are things we could ask them questions like, how was the duck? Was the duck happy? Does the duck have lots of friends? Or what does the duck want? You know, we're trying to create some what's the word? We're basically concept checking, you know, we're checking they've understood what was said and helping them follow the story. And that's especially important when we're using some sort of video, because maybe they missed something, maybe they don't understand. And we want to always be just double checking that the children are following. So the more you can follow, the more you're going to enjoy, right?
Absolutely. Sorry, Mark. I was just reading some of the comments coming into the chat box there as well. Yeah. Also, I think encouraging, students to retell you the story in their own language, in their first language is really valuable as well. Letting you know that they've understood, always giving praise for the fact that they've listened well and that they've predicted and that they've identified certain things in the story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a good thing about videos and stories as well, one thing to always remember is the first time is the most challenging time, because it's the first time you're going to see the story. But for any of you who have children or have worked with children for a long time, you'll know that children love to watch the same thing over and over and over again. And that's a really powerful tool. That's something we should take advantage of in our classes. There's a reason children love it. It's not because they forget, it's the opposite. It's because they remember. It creates a safe space for them. They know what's going to happen, and so they want to see it again because it makes them feel at ease. And so even though we've watched this Duck's Friend story and we know he's sad, once they've seen it a couple of times, they're going to remember eventually he's happy, and they'll want to see it again. And they want to see it again and again and again. And again and again and again, right? And that's so powerful. Everybody's seen the wonderful Shark song. I'm not going to talk about it, but that's over and over. Then, right? No. I wouldn't do that to you all. But that's over and over and over again. And it's the comfort of knowing what happens. Not only is it repetitive, but it's also they know what's happening, and they enjoy it. With the actions as well, the TPR that goes along with it. It's repetition is a real powerful tool, as are routines, So taking advantage of that. And that's one of the beauties of using digital resources, especially with very young learners.
So on that note, using games as well as a digital learning tool, this is a really powerful thing. I'm sure you're all aware of, using games as a way of reinforcing the language which we've taught via stories and via chants and via songs and via other types of course materials, and things which can be used online as well. They don't necessarily need to be used in a face-to-face classroom. How can we use games to reinforce what we've taught or what children have learnt, let's say? So we've got a couple of examples which could be adapted for face-to-face classroom, some old favourites, but which also are available in an online environment and in digital format. Okay. So first one, find the pairs. Mark, are you a fan of this game?
I do love a matching game as much as the next kid, because really they're so useful. They're fun, and especially the digital ones, they're great to do with the kids, because again it teaches them responsible use of technology. It's not just for fun. Oh, but I'm doing it in class and I'm learning these new words, or we're training them to interact with technology as much as learn from technology. And those healthy habits are so fundamental to teach from such an early age, that there are things we can do in person and physically, and also there are things and ways we can do them technology. This is a game we've played how many times with the kids with flashcards?
A million times with flashcards, but as you say, it's something which has been adapted for online purposes and can be done. Still develops critical thinking skills, still encourages learners to retain memory and to remember the vocabulary and to associate different words with images and things like that. Another example here. So, Mark, I'm going to test your memory.
Oh, okay, here we go.
Those images at the bottom. You ready?
Yep, ready.
You need to tell me what's missing.
A balloon? Candle?
It's a nice way of getting the children again to interact with the vocabulary that they've been learning. Just going to whiz through another couple of examples. Thanks in the chat box. We've got the after their script. A couple more examples. The next one is something like this. So encouraging predicting skills and also promoting visual literacy. So instead of showing a full visual at the same time, you might choose to select an image and show parts of it like this and encourage students to tell you, okay, what can you see? What do you think it might be? What is there in the image? What do you think is happening? And then build it up, always scaffold it step by step. So after you've done that, show the image of, okay, this is the complete image.
What's also really nice with these types, because this is a type of activity that's super easy to do, like digitally. In class, it's a bit more complicated. If you have a big picture and sticking Post-its or whatever it might be over a post, it could be a bit chaotic. But a nice activity like this is really good, because what it enables us to do as teachers is, especially with the very young learners, is focus in on specific vocabulary. You know, on a bigger picture, we can highlight the t-shirt and say blue t-shirt, or we can highlight the happy boy and say happy boy, or smiling girl. You know, we can really focus in on specifics because we can control what they see and as they go along, you know. So it's like a nice way of taking advantage of like the I suppose it's almost the limitations of technology, because it's quite rigid, isn't it, in appearing, disappearing boxes. But it's a real nice way to focus attention, you know, limit input.
It is. It's also offering lots of different opportunities, you know, for lots of different questions and things like that. I think we've got one more example, which I think I probably made this quite easy for you. Yeah, I'm sure you could make this more complex for your learners, but you know, the idea of this game is, what is there? Any ideas, Mark? What do you think this is?
We can go from smaller to bigger to bigger. It's basically
if you don't know what this is, so shall I give you a clue? Oh,
this is good. And then the full image would be
and it is a
giraffe. So I had to say, I'm sorry. The beauty of it is again, it's focusing in the attention on specific details. You know, it's getting them to use their critical brains to identify, what is it, a horse, or is it a giraffe, or is it a camel?
And providing support where needed. Exactly.
And like in the chat box, there are some people making some nice comments.
I'm just aware of the time. I think we're going to go into some questions in a couple of minutes, but just to summarize, we've just whizzed through a few games there with you, which could be done just as easily in a virtual online environment as in a face-to-face one. The benefits are, you know, they're very, we know that games are very important for young learners and essential for healthy development in early childhood and beyond. And it allows them to experiment through trial and error. It doesn't matter if they get things right or wrong. It's about experimenting and discovering, and encouraging them to build their confidence, and encouraging them as well to interact as much as possible with their classmates, and ultimately, as we said at the beginning, to enjoy themselves and have fun. So just before we finish off, a couple of other things, a couple of other ideas, you know, going beyond language skills, what we also want to do is to develop life competencies. One idea here is to encourage students to reflect on their emotions. And that can be something as simple as drawing a smiley face or a sad face after an activity to let the students express themselves and to let you know how they feel about a particular activity. And then if you feel that they can do this, ask them questions to reflect specifically on what they learned in terms of content. So what do you feel that you learned? How well do you think that you did? And what do you think you should do next? So all of these different aspects that we can bring in that go beyond language, but into key life competencies, which, as we all know, are becoming increasingly important. Okay. And just as a final thing there, I think, Mark, I don't know if you want to add anything here, but I think just to make sure that we always give positive reinforcement and feedback to any age learners, whether that's just a smile, it might be stickers. I don't think it needs to be a very young child to get a sticker. I think it could be anyone. I mean, I think it could be an adult class to get stickers. What do you reckon, Mark?
I'm a sticker fan. I still give stickers to the teenage kid in the house, you know, like stickers are great. Stickers are great. But you know, the really nice thing about this is positive reinforcement is it's all about just not saying what's wrong, but saying what you did well. You did this fantastic. Well done. You know what I mean? It's not just about focusing on where we can improve. It's about also acknowledging where we've succeeded. And I think especially with very young learners, they only look for admiration, you know, at any teacher, any adult in their life. So when we encourage them, they're just going to grow and grow and grow as a person. And it also encourages that open mindset, you know, that growth mindset, just being positive and saying, come on, we can do it, you can do it, you've done really well already. You know what I mean? That encouragement, I think that's the secret, whether it's in person or online.
Absolutely. So just to summarize, this is what we think, you know, the benefits of integrating digital pedagogy into pre-primary and primary classrooms as well, to promote things like social interaction, to prompt empathy in a time where, you know, children have not had much of an opportunity to be in physical contact with other children as well. So starting to build that up again, opportunities for increasing communication and collaboration. On a final note, before we pass back over to Justina for questions, this is how we want our learners to feel, that they belong, that they're in a welcomed and comfortable classroom educational environment. And let's take all the steps that we can do to make sure that happens. Okay, so thank you very much, everybody. And let's see if we've got any questions.
Thank you, Alexandra and Mark, for such a great presentation. Really great session. We had some really lovely comments in the chat box during this session. I think we all appreciated the lovely ideas. And there's been quite a few questions coming in. It's actually really difficult to choose from them. They're all excellent questions. There is one, let's start, a question from Alan about providing opportunities for interaction between very young learners in online situation. Can you share any thoughts on that? How can we provide these opportunities for interaction between students in an online classroom?
Any ideas, Alex?
It's definitely it's a difficult question. It's something that we've been asked more than once over the last year and a half, and I think it's a challenge which many people have faced, and not an easy one to answer. I'd say by taking little steps, by encouraging students to work, maybe working offline when they can, doing things off the screen when they can as well, and well, taking little steps. I'd say like breaking it down into mini activities, so encouraging them to come up to the screen, maybe doing find it activities, to do physical things, to show things,
I think also when we're talking about trying to encourage interaction, interaction online inevitably is interaction with the screen. Like when we're working together, we're working no matter whether it's with one other person or with everybody in the class. So any moment we could, for example, do a chant on the screen, the interaction is really happening with the group. Like we can clap to the screen, we can put our thumbs up, we can wave, or whatever we do. Although it's not like traditional classroom interaction, it is group interaction because they feel a part of something that's happening in front of them. I think that's kind of maybe a way of encouraging interaction, but it's never going to be the same, right?
Yes, I think that's a really great point. Maybe children don't necessarily do things together in one room, but the screen and seeing your colleagues on screen does create a sense of, participating in a group activity. That's great. Someone else is asking about using videos, and perhaps the story videos that you showed with a sad duckling. Can these be used for teaching grammar? Any ideas?
Personally, with very, very young learners, yes, so sad, isn't it? It's so sad. But with very young learners, for me, it's all about first enjoying and receiving the story and following the story, more than about learning the specifics. They can understand emotion much better than they can understand words, and I think that's where stories have the real power. That knowledge will come, through experiencing and through interacting and being in an environment where the language is being used.
That's great. Thank you.
I would just add
Alex.
to that. Sorry, Justina. Just add to that. Like I completely agree with what Mark's saying, but I think at pre-primary we're talking about languages is more received. So the grammar is there, but it's more from a receptive point of view. So the children are there to enjoy the story and to interact as much as they can with their classmates and with their teacher and enjoy the learning process. And that's what's more important at this stage.
Thank you. I think this could be related perhaps to another question also from Alan about modeling to support the verbal instructions for activities in very young learners' classroom. I'm guessing this relates to helping young learners pick up the language, the kind of very common classroom interaction language. So how can we model or how can we use modeling to support that verbal instruction?
What was the specific question?
So how can we use modeling to support verbal instructions for activities in very young learners' classroom?
I'd say with any type of instructions and at any level, and Mark, you and I, we've spoken about this before, haven't we? It's like always provide multiple entry points. So even though we're dealing with, not particularly developed literacy skills in pre-primary, always offer maybe a visual and a verbal and a written instruction, so to provide the learners with as many entry points as possible so they can understand the task as much as they can in order to be able to carry it out as best as they can.
Yeah, like using an icon, using an action, and using a word, like that type of thing, right?
Yeah. And then also maybe following that up with providing an example of what we mean by the task. But I think one thing that we've found has proved really effective is to provide as many different access points in terms of instructions as possible.
Great. Just reading through some more questions. Suddenly, they're coming thick and fast. For young learners, 5 years and below, how long should the class time be, and how many students per class in an online setting? Do you have any advice on that?
Do you know, the first thing that comes to mind is how long's a piece of string?
Yeah.
It could be as long as short as you want. I think very young learners obviously have a very limited attention span. They're not used to the academic environment. So really long lessons, no, I don't know what the ideal length would be, depends on the group. But
yes, I would say, well, I would argue or question, is there an ideal length? I think I'm going to go with the classic answer of, I think it depends. I think we're talking about very young children. I don't know if you agree, Mark, we're talking about young children. It depends on the day, it depends on the weather, it depends on what we're trying to, what we're expecting of them. I would say that in an online environment, it should be less. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah. And regarding numbers, I mean, it depends on the kids. Again, it depends on how well they behave, or if they have family support at home, because a lot of the time there are parents also helping them in the classroom. It just depends. But as long as we're really well structured and we've got the children quite well trained and they know the routine and they know what they have to do, the number can be a bit more. If it's a new class or maybe they're a bit chaotic, it's gonna have to be less, because it's going to be really hard to manage such a group. Okay,
so that was a tricky one. I'm afraid all the questions are really quite in depth, and so to change slightly the theme, there's a question about feedback for very young learners. How can we correct a shy child who can rarely answer my questions? Any advice on giving feedback to very young learners?
Positive feedback, praise, positive reinforcement, make sure the child feels as comfortable as possible, I would say.
Yeah, build, if it's really hard to frame it as positive when you're being critical, isn't it? That's the challenge. Is like, it's not that you've done bad, it's trying to teach them that I'm not telling you off for saying the wrong word, but we're trying to get it right, make a challenge out of it, make it fun, and support them. Don't bring it up in front of class. If it's a shy child, it's sit down beside them and maybe sort of talk to them one-to-one. Really important with younger learners is come down to their level. Don't stand up. I mean, I'm quite a tall person, so in any case, I have to sit down to talk to little kids, If you're at eye level, it's easier for them to talk to you instead of sort of standing. That's kind of like a little classroom management way to interact with, especially shy young learners, I think.
But also what we want to do, I mean, at any age, of course, but especially with pre-primary, with very young learners, we want them to feel comfortable and happy and safe in their learning environment. So the more that we can offer them positive reinforcement and positive comments and, tell them what they've done well, instead of focusing on the negatives, I think that's more important than anything else. I think that's the most important thing.
So positive feedback, encouragement, positive comments, focus on what the child's doing well. And I think that's all what we've got time for. I think it's a really positive sort of moment to finish the session. Thank you so much to our presenters, Alexandra and Mark. Thank you to our lovely audience for being so engaged, and thank you for all your great questions.